A spirited little boy makes a surprising entrance at a billionaire CEO's wedding, exclaiming, "How could you forget about mommy?" as the guests begin to react, laughing, believing it's a prank. Before pausing in astonishment at the billionaires, we're excited to hear from you. Before we dive in, share in the comments where you're tuning in from. And don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. Support the channel, then sit back, relax, and enjoy. The story of the floral arrangements featured immaculate rows of pristine white roses. Draped over the pews like delicate lace, chandeliers cast a golden glow across the hall where hundreds of impeccably dressed guests buzzed with excitement. The air rich with the delightful scent of expensive perfume and champagne. The ceremony was planned flawlessly, with every detail meticulously attended to. Victoria Langford stood at the altar in a gown that had been hand-stitched by a European designer, with every bead perfectly in place, every layer flowing perfectly, her smile radiant and her posture impeccable. She was precisely the kind of woman that someone like Jackson Harrington was destined to marry, refined, composed, and the embodiment of grace. Front pages for all the right reasons. Jackson stood beside her, hands loosely at his sides. Clasped in front of him, to anyone watching, he radiated confidence. The billionaire mogul who had conquered the business world and was now embracing the next great chapter of his life, but beneath the polished outside, he felt a tightness in his chest that he couldn't fully understand, a pressure that had been lingering, building all morning. He had always excelled at overlooking things that didn't align perfectly with his plans, confidently pushing forward, keeping his focus where it mattered. He reassured himself that this was just nerves. The wedding of this scale brought an exciting level of attention that many might not fully understand. With cameras flashing from the back of the room, a constant reminder that every movement, every glance, every whisper would be thoughtfully analyzed, discussed, and dissected. There was a sense of certainty as the official cleared his throat, beaming at the guests before turning back to the couple. "We are gathered here today to joyfully celebrate the union of the heavy." Doors at the end of the hall swung open, and a collective gasp rippled through the room as heads turned. With a few guests eagerly looking on, muttering in confusion, others peering over their shoulders with polite curiosity. At first, no one moved. Then excitement began to build. A small figure burst through the doorway, the boy no more than 7, full of energy and determination, slender yet brimming with resolve. His sneakers squeaked against the marble floor as he confidently marched down the aisle with the kind of authority that belonged to someone 3 times his size. He was out of breath, chest rising and falling with determination. Quick bursts with his messy hair sticking to his forehead as if he had been running. Somewhere in the crowd, someone chuckled, a wedding crasher. Perhaps a distant friend bringing a touch of unexpected joy. A relative's child, filled with curiosity and enthusiasm, had wandered into the spotlight, and then he spoke. His voice capturing everyone's attention, cut through the room, high-pitched and unwavering, as muffled laughter spread joyfully. Amid the guests, someone near the front let out an amused scoff, and a few people eagerly reached for their phones, ready to capture the moment, to capture what was undoubtedly an entertaining interruption. Even Victoria felt her fingers tightening around her. Bouquet glanced at Jackson with a thin, forced smile, hopeful that he would wave it off. They were able to keep Charlie's small frame steady, his hands curling into. With determination in his expression, he focused intently on Jackson, his fist clenched. "How could you forget about mommy?" The laughter faded away, and the room changed completely. Dense with an intriguing tension, the amused glances transformed into. Amid the uncertainty, people exchanged glances, hopeful for someone to shed light on the situation, while Victoria's fingers remained gently wrapped around her bouquet turned firm. The officiant paused, his practiced composure wavering. The gentle hum of whispered uncertainty filled the space. Jackson sensed the attention of everyone in the room, but his focus sharpened on the boy in front of him. Everything around him faded, the grandeur of the wedding, the crowd. Cameras didn't matter at all because he truly understood who Charlie was. His breath was steady and confident. With hands relaxed at his sides, he instinctively took a step back. It was a subtle movement that might go unnoticed by many, yet for those observing intently, like Victoria and the guests in the front rows, it holds significance. The reporters were keenly observing every shift of his expression, It conveyed so much. Volumes. Charlie stood his ground, arms folded across his chest, confident and ready. Are you going to just stare at me, or do you have something exciting to share? Jackson's mouth opened, but no words came. He was a man who had negotiated. Billion-dollar deals can transform entire boardrooms with just a single glance, creating an atmosphere of excitement and possibility. Empire built on sheer determination, he faced rivals, lawsuits, and economic challenges head-on. Challenges, surprises, and unexpected turns, and yet at this moment, a 7-year-old boy had him. Victoria, feeling the pressure, took a deep breath as she navigated through the challenges ahead. Turned toward Jackson with a perfectly measured whisper. "What is this, Jackson?" Didn't respond. His throat felt parched, and his thoughts were intertwined. He might have anticipated this. He should have realized that the past would eventually catch up with him. However, he hadn't. And that's part of the journey. A part of his life had always felt like a distant memory, something he had moved on from so thoroughly that it seemed impossible to revisit. Resurface, and yet here stood Charlie, unmistakably present, as the room transformed around him. The silence was palpable, yet the tension continued to rise as Charlie lifted his chin, showing determination. Remember, his voice was steady, yet there was an intriguing edge to it, something sharp. Beneath the surface, it's understandable that you might have overlooked her as well. There was a clear accusation in his tone, and somewhere in the crowd, someone let. With a slow exhale, the guests, many of them high society figures familiar with scandals, were beginning to connect the dots. What was happening? Jackson took a step forward, but Charlie didn't flinch. His stance grew more resolute. This was no accidental visitor. This was a boy driven by purpose. Victoria's expression held a mysterious quality. Yet the slight clench of her jaw and the way her fingers tightened over suggested a depth of feeling that hinted at something more. The bouquet conveyed so much more than words ever could. This was an unexpected twist, a delightful surprise. Something she had planned for, and Victoria Langford was not a fan of surprises. The officiant seemed a bit uncertain about what to do. With a slight cough, it seems like Jackson has finally found his voice. "Who brought you here?" Charlie didn't even hesitate. "I came by myself." A few gasps fluttered through the room as someone shared a thought about security. A buzz of excitement spread among the guests, shifting their attention from confusion to fascination. Charlie crossed his arms again. "You're acting. It's surprising. But really, you already know the reason I'm here." Jackson's throat. The challenge became more intense as the weight of the moment enveloped him, pressing in from all sides. Every direction is filled with excitement. The wedding, the cameras, the guests, and the truth. All coming together in a beautiful moment. In the midst of it all was a little boy who had just transformed the life he had so carefully crafted. The room felt a bit too cozy. The walls seemed to close in, yet the grand hall's open space buzzed with the vibrant energy of the crowd, a delightful wave of whispers filling the air. And hushed speculation swept through the guests as someone's champagne flute clinked against the floor, unnoticed in the excitement. The live orchestra, amidst the rising tension, allowed their last note to gently fade into a moment of anticipation, transformed into a grand spectacle before Jackson could even. As the weight of the recent events settled, security confidently moved 2 men in dark suits, their earpieces in place, stepping forward with purpose. To escort Charlie out, their movement swift and professional. He could have anticipated that they would be prepared to address disruptions swiftly and seamlessly to ensure the smooth execution of an event as high-profile as this one. And yet watching them approach, a sharp discomfort gripped his chest. "No," the word left his mouth before he could think about it. The security guards paused mid-step, and Jackson swallowed, pushing through with determination, himself to steady his voice and let him talk. They paused, turning to him for guidance. Confirmation, he nodded once, and they backed off, blending into the background, yet the energy in the room remained palpable. Charlie, undeterred, lifted his chin, ready to embrace what lies ahead. A few gasps rippled through the guests, and someone stifled a laugh, but the amusement mingled with a hint of discomfort as Victoria's expression tightened at Jackson. Hardly noticed his attention was on the boy standing before him. The one who had crashed his wedding, the one who had just transformed his entire world with just a few words. His suit felt a bit stiff, but that was just the beginning of something new. The starched collar felt overwhelming as he sensed the weight of every gaze upon him, all waiting and anticipating what he would do next. Take control to shut it down. But how could he? Charlie's small frame didn't waver. You don't even recognize me, do you? Jackson exhaled, shaking his head. His pulse was uneven, and his thoughts were tangled. He should have known. He should have felt something the moment he saw him. Guess. It's understandable that Charlie moved on, especially since Mommy was also overlooked. Those words resonate deeply. More challenging than expected, the silence that followed was profound, stretching between them like a canyon. It was only interrupted by the rustle of fabric as Victoria took a confident step forward, her presence now vibrant. Jackson, she said through clenched teeth, her voice low enough that only he could hear. What on earth is happening? He didn't. He couldn't find the words. His throat felt tight, and his mind was racing. Victoria's patience was tested as her nails dug into the bouquet, still held tightly in her grip. She was determined to find a solution, but how? Charlie was eagerly awaiting an answer, while Jackson motivated himself to. He decided to push through the fog in his head and take action, crouching down to focus. He held the boy close, steadying his breath. Who's your mother, Charlie? His stance remained unchanged, yet there was a newfound sharpness in his expression, something defiant. Oh, so now you care. Folded his arms with a sense of anticipation, as if he had been looking forward to this moment and had already made up his mind about it. Her name is Lena Porter. Ring any bells, Dad? Everything came to a halt. The name resonated like a spark, a punch more effective than anything Charlie could have physically thrown at him. He didn't need to hear more. He didn't need proof. Lena Porter, the past wasn't just knocking. It had burst through the door. Door opened and walked straight in. Victoria let out a breath that sounded surprisingly like a scoff. You have got to be kidding me. The weight of it settled over Jackson's shoulders. A challenge that he could rise above. Had spent years not thinking about Lena, years convincing himself that she had been a part of another life, one that he had moved on. She had been the girl he once envisioned a bright future with before that future transformed into something new. Boardrooms, acquisitions, and the excitement of pursuing something greater. He reassured himself that what they had was not destined to endure, and that this was for the best. But here was the truth. Standing in front of him with Lena's fire and his voice, and Jackson's own features staring back at him, Charlie felt a surge of possibility. The silence lingered, then it huffed. Right. That's what I thought. Victoria shifted, the crisp rustle of her dress breaking through the thick silence. I'm not doing this, she muttered, her voice clipped. Jackson turned to her, still too struggling to find the right words to explain, even though there wasn't really an explanation. The truth was clear now. Victoria shook her head, not in anger, but in a sense of astonished realization. This is a challenging moment, and just like that, the tension shifted once more. The whispers are here. Returned the nuanced understanding present in every exchange of glances among the guests and the reporters near the back. She confidently walked away, the train of her gown flowing behind her, completely unbothered by the fact that they were still filming. Catching on the edge of the step leading down from the altar, the officiant took a step back, glancing around with a sense of curiosity. However, at Jackson, the wedding faced some challenges. Jackson had the opportunity to show his care, but things didn't go as planned. All he could focus on was the boy still staring him down. His head was spinning, but he encouraged himself to think clearly. Through the chaos, through the guests, through the life he had built so carefully, he turned, catching sight of. His assistant stood near the edge of the venue, phone in hand, exuding an air of readiness as if he was already one step ahead of the game. The disaster control team, Jackson, raised a hand, signaling to take him somewhere exciting. Private now? Charlie's eyes sparkled with determination. I'm not going anywhere with some unusual guy. In a suit, Jackson took a deep breath, determined to push through the headache building behind his eyes. I'll come to you when I'm done here. Charlie hesitated, then let out a playful sigh, as if this whole situation was just a part of the adventure. Had been tiring for him. But he started walking toward the exit with determination. Before he stepped out, he turned back. You can play the role of a rich businessman all you want, but you're still the guy who broke my mom's heart. And then he was gone. The whispers grew louder, and the questions would. The headlines were already being crafted. And the woman he had promised to marry was walking away, heels clicking against the polished floor, her exit as striking as her Silence. But that didn't matter at all. For the first time in years, Jackson was gazing at the remnants of something he had once shattered, and for the first time in his life, he felt a sense of possibility. How to improve it as the venue gradually cleared out. Guests exchanged quiet murmurs, amongst themselves gliding past each other with sidelong glances and quiet curiosity. Some of those who thrived for the high society drama unfolded with anticipation as everyone eagerly awaited to see if Jackson would make a valiant effort to salvage the wedding The reception was sealed before the last chair was even tucked away. The orchestra wrapped up, but the caterers took their time, while his assistant cheerfully handled calls from eager reporters who were already on the line. Transformed the ruined wedding into tomorrow's exciting headline. It didn't matter. Jackson sat in the back of his car, quiet as the city flowed by the tinted windows. Victoria had called once. He hadn't answered yet. But perhaps he would later when he felt ready to embrace whatever farewell she had in store. He was ready, but at that moment, there was only one thing on his mind. Lena. He wasn't. Absolutely. The name lingered in his mind, a weight that had been there for years, long enough that she could have been a cherished memory, a figure from old photographs tucked away in boxes he never opened. She was part of the past, and Jackson had always embraced the future. His life had been built on momentum and forward motion, on always moving forward, never allowing regret to catch up. Even though regret was quietly waiting somewhere in his house right now, arms crossed, gazing at him as if this moment had been anticipated for a lifetime, the car arrived at his estate. Iron gates closed behind them with a gentle hum, and Jackson hardly noticed. He stepped out, rolling his shoulders back with a sense of readiness, as if that would somehow set the stage for the uplifting conversation ahead inside the house. It was calm, with only the gentle murmur of his assistant chatting with security near the entrance. He eagerly followed the sound, discovering Charlie comfortably settled in his study, small yet resolute in the oversized leather chair behind his desk. A glass of water sat patiently in front of him, while his sneakers tapped a steady rhythm against the leg of the chair. Charlie didn't look up immediately, but hey, better late than never. Jackson exhaled. He was pleasantly surprised by the way he was being spoken to, especially by a child. He could have felt annoyed, but instead, he chose to sit down across from him with a calm demeanor, studying the boy who had shattered his carefully constructed life in under 5 minutes. Charlie felt a sense of curiosity and hope. Anything he looked at seemed to bring a hint of amusement. "You're doing your best at this dad thing," said, head tilting. "I had a whole speech planned, and you were meant to deny. I'll show you just how wrong you were with an exciting DNA test. But you already seem to have an idea." Jackson ran a hand down his face, feeling the exhaustion settle in. "Your mom never." Charlie let out a quiet scoff, leaning back with a smile. "Yeah, well, you also never anticipated the words would strike harder than he expected. He should have hadn't." In response to that, the silence that stretched between them felt charged as Jackson shifted, elbows resting against the arms of the chair. "Where is she?" Charlie's smirk softened. He looked away, fingers gently tightening around the hem of his hoodie. Jackson sat up straighter. "Charlie." The boy paused for a moment, then exhaled deeply. "She's not feeling well," he said softly. "That's why I came." Jackson's jaw tightened. The words carried a weight that seemed greater than expected. "What kind?" Charlie hesitated again, shifting uncomfortably, as if saying it out loud would somehow change the situation. "She's been feeling a bit tired and has a cough. But it's a chance for her to rest more. She used to work full shifts, and now she can focus on her well-being. Manages to get through half." He swallowed. "And I'm not sure about everything. But that's all right. But I believe we can find the support we need." Jackson's grip tightened on the arms of his chair. Charlie's words may have stirred something within him as much as they did. And it was the way he expressed them, as if he had been carrying that weight on his small shoulders for longer than any child should. He had spent years believing that Lena had moved on, that whatever they had once been left there, neatly wrapped and waiting to be rediscovered. He had never considered, not even for a moment, the possibilities that lay within. The thought that she had been nurturing his son on her own, and now she was facing some challenges. The child she had nurtured on her own was now standing before him, eagerly seeking the answers he didn't possess. For the first time in years, money didn't feel like a solution. Charlie's fingers drummed against the desk, filled with a sense of anticipation. "It seems you might have a lot of questions." Jackson took a slow breath. Sure, you can ask, but I might not share all the details. I trust you, but the honesty hit me hard, like a punch to the ribs. Jackson hadn't. He anticipated warmth, but hearing it expressed so clearly stirred something within him. He hadn't fully recognized how deeply he desired this. Charlie hopped down from the chair, stretching with excitement as he waited for the words to confirm that he could trust him. What now? Jackson watched him, still processing everything he had experienced. Throughout my life, I've been dedicated to addressing challenges with strategic negotiation and precision, even when obstacles arose. Blueprint for this. I find your mother. Charlie studied him, weighing his. He responded thoughtfully, as if weighing a decision, then nodded with a sense of assurance, tucking his hands into the pockets of his hoodie. Everything is going well. Just stay focused. He walked toward the door, pausing for a moment. To glance over his shoulder, you do that a lot, don't you? Jackson frowned. What Charlie shrugged left people behind the words should have stung, but Charlie left the room, and Jackson sat in the quiet, embracing the moment as his carefully controlled world began to transform. Step by step, there were still 100 things to tackle, follow-ups to manage, and calls to make, but it was all manageable. It was important. He reached for his phone, ready to find Lena Porter next. Morning. Jackson woke up to a world that had transformed overnight. His phone was an overwhelming number of unread messages. His PR team working diligently to manage the situation, board members seeking clarity, and Victoria left a single final voicemail that the media eagerly embraced, even though he didn't take the time to listen to it. The scandal like eager observers. His face was prominently displayed across every news outlet with headlines discussing the unexpected turn of events for Jackson Harrington, the billionaire who found himself left at the altar by a hidden history. It was tumultuous, yet he found it hard to be concerned about Charlie on the other hand. He appeared completely at ease as he strolled into the dining room that morning, exuding a sense of ownership over the space, wearing the same hoodie from yesterday, his sneakers tapping against the marble floor as he added the delightful spread. Beautifully arranged on the table are trays of fresh fruit, eggs, pastries, and an exquisite imported coffee, sat untouched. Beautifully arranged by a chef who had no idea that the only guest this morning was a spirited 7-year-old ready to make the most of the day. Charlie eagerly grabbed a croissant, tearing off a piece as he cheerfully settled into a chair. We often imagine rich people enjoying their time in their beautiful mansions, but there's so much more to life than just that. Friends. Jackson sat down with his coffee, ready to tackle the day ahead. I have business to discuss. Meetings. Charlie made a face. Wow, sounds exciting. The enthusiasm was almost palpable. Impressive. Jackson smiled, glancing at his assistant who stood by the door. The man appeared to be contemplating whether to step in, having dedicated himself tirelessly to tracking down. Lena is exploring old records and reaching out to contacts, making calls that Jackson never imagined he would need to make, and we discovered her, the assistant finally said. Charlie perked up instantly, shoving the rest of. Jackson stood, finally taking the croissant into his mouth after what felt like a long wait. Adjusting his jacket, he felt a sense of anticipation. While he wasn't sure what to expect, he knew one thing for certain: this was going to be an exciting experience. The drive was short, yet it felt like it lasted longer, with a peaceful silence in between. There was an unspoken connection as Charlie tapped his fingers against the car door, shifting with eager anticipation. Seat. Jackson had countless questions swirling in his mind, each one a stepping stone toward the answers he truly sought. What kind of life had Lena built without him? How had she managed on her own all these years? Why hadn't she reached out to Charlie? Jackson sighed and broke the silence first, asking, So, how rich are you? I'm curious about. Charlie shrugged. Are you the type of rich who buys islands, or the kind that inspires others? Sign contracts before they enjoy dinner with you. Jackson didn't respond to Charlie, smirked as if he had achieved something special when they arrived at a quaint little apartment complex, the kind with character and charm. Bricks and windows that danced in the wind. It was a refreshing change from the places Jackson had grown accustomed to, with no towering ceilings, no doorman, no sleek black cars lining the curb. It was quiet, modest, but full of potential. A place designed for those who dedicate long hours and carefully manage every paycheck. Jackson paused for just a moment. Before stepping out of the car, Charlie eagerly made his way up the steps. As if this was just another exciting part of his day, he knocked 3 quick raps against the wood, and the door opened to reveal Lena standing there. Looking between them, her fingers still curled around the doorknob. For the first time in years, Jackson felt a sense of completeness. Completely amazed, she was different from the girl he remembered from college. In a unique way. There were traces of her, of course, the same sharp, intelligent gaze, the way she carried herself with a certain familiarity, tilting her head slightly, as if she was contemplating what to say, but she appeared transformed, with a hint of weariness in her posture and a gentle curve to her shoulders. The way she leaned against the door frame, as if it was the only thing supporting her, made him realize then that he has been waiting for her to be the same girl he left behind. Forever captured in a moment. Lena's lips were pressed together, and after a moment, she finally exhaled, saying, "I told you. Let's not forget about this, Charlie. You also reminded me to enjoy my vegetables." She sighed, stepping back to let him in, both of them aware of the journey that had brought them to this moment. Her gaze flickered to Jackson. A mystery in his expression. She must have sensed that this moment was on the horizon. Yet she still appeared somewhat uncertain about his presence. He gathered his courage and spoke, "Lena." And she turned to meet him. His gaze held a moment where everything around them felt suspended. Charlie rolled his eyes, playfully asking, "So, are you guys going to?" Lena let out a light-hearted laugh, shaking her head as she wondered if they would just stare at each other or embrace the excitement of a dramatic family reunion. "Charlie, go get some juice from the fridge." The boy huffed but happily obeyed, disappearing into the kitchen in no time. He was out of sight, but the air between them shifted. Jackson took a step forward, curious about what was to come. "Didn't you mention that Lena leaned against the counter, crossing her arms over her chest? Would you have stayed to ponder the question?" It was harder than it needed to be. Jackson didn't have an answer, and that was the challenge. Lena allowed the silence to linger, creating a moment of anticipation. Before shaking her head, she smiled and said, "That's why I didn't tell you." He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling. "Lena," he began, and she held up a, "Let's not linger here. Wishing we could go back and change what has already happened. It's done. You've made your choices, and I've made mine." He clenched his jaw, and what comes next is full of possibilities. About Charlie, that wasn't his choice. Her expression brightened just briefly before. She shook her head. "You're right, it wasn't." She sighed, rubbing a hand over. Her face looks like Jackson. "I'm feeling a bit worn out and would prefer to focus on the present instead of going over the past. If you're here to write a check and boost your spirits, that's not the way to go." Bother, his chest tightened. "Do you think that's why I'm here?" Lena let out a dry laugh. "Isn't it funny?" No. His voice came out sharper than he expected. He took a slow breath, seeking to find his footing in a conversation that flowed freely, without a script or strategy. "I was eager to learn more about him, Lena. You didn't give me the opportunity, and if I had, what would you have done differently?" Question he didn't have an answer for, but before he could try, Charlie returned with a juice box in hand. "I asked if I missed anything." And Lena shook her head, already reaching for. "I need to grab her keys to pick up my prescription. If you both want to have a discussion, feel free to do it somewhere else." Charlie frowned. But with a hint of determination, she said, "I can go with you." After a brief hesitation, she sighed and added, "Fine, let's do it. Go." Charlie turned to Jackson. "You coming?" Jackson looked between them, feeling a spark of excitement, a shift in his own chest that he couldn't quite name. "Yes," he said, "I am Lena." "Didn't?" She confidently stepped forward, leading the way out the door for the first time in his life. Life for Jackson took an unexpected turn, and he found himself reflecting on what had changed within him. But something changed the moment he stepped out of Lena's apartment and back into the sleek black car waiting for him. The world he had built over the years felt like a distant memory, as if it belonged to someone else. The towering offices, the board meetings, the thoughtfully arranged life. Everything felt a bit out of sync with what truly mattered. Yet he had dedicated his career to making decisions with unwavering confidence, assessing opportunities and embracing rewards, yet this transcended business. It was a journey of life he had left behind without realizing it, and now he was ready to create a new strategy, a fresh roadmap for repairing what had once been damaged. He embraced his usual approach when encountering a challenge. He continued to be present at Initially, Lena wasn't overly excited when he showed up again outside her apartment with a bag of groceries. But there was a hint of curiosity in her reaction. She gave him a glance before crossing her arms and leaning against the doorframe, curious about what was to come. "This is what you need." "Food." Her eyebrow lifted, "And I know that's why I buy it myself." He walked past her and stepped inside, placing the bags on the counter. Charlie, who had I've been sprawled on the couch with a comic book, barely looking up before letting out a dramatic sigh. "Here we go again. You do realize this is becoming quite interesting." Jackson didn't respond, concentrating on unpacking the groceries with a determination that's truly impressive. Lena shook her head, rubbing her temples with a smile. "I don't need rescuing, Jackson. I'm not trying to rescue you. So what are you doing?" He hesitated, but didn't back down. "Stop moving, making up for lost time." She exhaled as if she had anticipated that moment. Answer, and found it hard to accept. This is a challenge that requires more than just financial resources. It sounds like Charlie was really engaged in what was happening. "Does this mean you're officially on board?" "I'm a significant part of our lives now. And I must let you know that I come with a high price." Jackson shot him a look. "You're 7, Charlie shrugged, "and I require snacks." "Many of them," Lena said softly, shaking her head with a smile as she picked Ein from one of the bags. "All good. However, it's important not to let this become a regular occurrence." Just a few days later, he made another appearance. Time stood still as I waited outside Charlie's school, watching the children joyfully stream out for the day. Charlie noticed him, his entire body drooping as if he had just received some unexpected news. Charlie groaned as he trudged toward him, feeling a bit overwhelmed by the situation. "Are you following me now?" "I happen to be in the area, Jackson." Charlie gave him a flat look and said, "You live across town." Jackson didn't answer. Charlie gestured to the car with a hint of amusement, sharing a light-hearted comment about rich people and their quirky hobbies before happily climbing in. It turned into a routine that both of them embraced, even if they didn't openly acknowledge it. Jackson began to discover the little things, the details he had previously overlooked, like how Charlie preferred his sandwiches cut. Triangles, how he always had at least one bandage on his knee from some disaster on the playground, how he talked to Mile a minute when he was excited but pretended to be indifferent about everything else. Aina continued to resist. She discussed each time Jackson attempted to assist, each time he arrived with something beneficial, each time he engaged himself into the life she had built without him. And despite all her protests, she never truly stopped him. The real test was just around the corner. When he chose to fix her sink, it began as a simple observation. He had noticed the slow drip of water while lending a hand. Charlie worked on his homework, the rhythmic plink 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 filling the silence between their sentences, creating a lively atmosphere. Had shrugged when Jackson mentioned it. "It's been that way for a long time, and Mom continues to do her thing." Meaning to call someone, but she's busy. Jackson had never fixed a essency in his life. Has been an incredible journey for him, as he built billion-dollar companies, led thousands of employees, and navigated crises that would challenge many. It's truly inspiring to see how he has thrived through it all. How challenging can one faucet be? Charlie watched with a sense of lightheartedness as Jackson pulled up a tutorial on his device. Phone. He followed the steps with great care, his confidence unwavering until it seems there was a little mix-up with a bolt, and when it turned the wrong way, water burst out in an unexpected way. The geyser drenched him instantly, and Charlie erupted with laughter, gripping the counter for support as he doubled over in joy. "Oh, this is fantastic, Mom. You have to check this out." Lena walked in just as a stream of water splashed against Jackson's square, and she paused, wide-eyed, then quickly covered her mouth to hold back a giggle. "What a surprise. Are you doing?" Jackson soaked, wiped a hand down his face, and muttered something. With a smile, Charlie reached for the shut-off valve, still gasping for air, tears of laughter glistening in his eyes. "It seems challenging, but you appear so confident." And then he transitioned into another moment of excitement. Lena shook her head, laughing as she kicked her feet against the cabinets. "I tossed the towel at Jackson, and for someone so smart, you really missed the mark." Despite the faucet still leaking, Jackson felt a sense of belonging for the first time. A few nights later, Charlie handed him a piece of folded paper. Jackson opened it with anticipation, expecting another sarcastic note. Instead, it was a drawing 3 stick figures, one tall, one medium, and one small, standing together under a bright blue sky. He stared at it longer than he meant to. "What's this?" Charlie shrugged, stuffing his hands in his pockets as if he was nonchalantly embracing the moment. "Just another school project with Jackson." He carefully folded the paper and slid it into his wallet right behind his business cards, while Charlie playfully pretended not to notice, but he smiled. Jackson had dedicated his life to negotiating multi-million-dollar deals, navigating fierce competitors, and making impactful decisions that shaped entire industries he had encountered. Economic downturns, hostile takeovers, and market collapses are just challenges that we can overcome together. The excitement bubbling in his stomach when he stood outside Lena's apartment, contemplating whether to knock, had been. Weeks have passed since Charlie crashed his wedding, and during this time, Jackson has wonderfully become a part of his son's life in a meaningful way. He was pleasantly surprised that he picked him up from school, helped with homework, and learned more than he ever wanted to about cartoons and playground politics. He had adapted. He had adjusted. Albeit awkwardly, but Lena still remained a delightful puzzle. She seemed to embrace him, allowing him to stay in her life, and it was intriguing. There was always a distance, an invisible line she chose not to let him cross. When he finally knocked, Lena opened the door with a smile, arms crossed, leaning against the frame with that familiar guarded expression she always wore around him. He exhaled, and she got straight to the point. "Have dinner with me." She blinked, surprised. "What dinner?" he asked. Repeated, "Just you and me." "No, Charlie." Her lips parted slightly, and for once she looked pleasantly surprised. "You're asking me out?" "Yes." He paused, and before I understand your perspective. It's not about guilt or fixing the past. It's simply that I have a desire to move forward. I want to be with you and have a conversation, just the two of us. She took a moment to study him. "I'm looking for the silver lining. I appreciate your efforts, but let's focus on the present rather than grand gestures to make up for the past. Jackson, it's all good." He mentioned that I was considering something straightforward, and Lena paused for a moment before letting out a breath, shaking her head with a sense of anticipation, as if she had a feeling this would turn out to be a memorable experience. "But we enjoy dining at places where everyone feels at home. No need for five-star restaurants or private chefs, just good, familiar food." He gave a short nod, and in just 15 minutes, we can explore the fascinating world of molecular food science. Later, Jackson came to see that he had made a choice that could have been better. At the diner Lena picked was a delightful contrast to the places he was used to. The neon sign flickered cheerfully, and the walls were adorned with framed photos of longtime customers and beloved local celebrities filled the space, while the delightful aroma of coffee, grilled cheese, and a hint of grease wafted through the air, accompanied by the familiar laminated menus, were just a bit sticky. And the waitress warmly greeted Lena by name before handing them 2 plastic-covered menus. Jackson turned. He scanned the options with the determination of someone eager to unlock the secrets of a new language. "What's a patty melt?" Lena snorted, the sound so unexpected that he looked up, surprised to see her actually laughing, truly laughing for the first time in years. "It's amazing how you can feel so free," she said, shaking her head. "It's just a burger on toasted bread." Jackson tried to relax, but he wasn't feeling it at all. He was definitely out of his element, yet there was a sense of possibility in the air. Lena knew he could negotiate corporate mergers in his sleep, but here in a small-town diner, he was the outsider, and yet for the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of acceptance when the waitress returned, and Lena confidently ordered without glancing at the menu. Jackson, still a bit unsure, decided to go for the patty melt. Lena's amused gaze made the conversation feel light at first, even easier than he had anticipated. They shared stories about Charlie and his remarkable talent for navigating tricky situations, including the time he attempted to sell candy, selling bars at school at a markup to fund his education. He shared his plan with the principal, creating a bright future. Lena said with a smile, "I had to step in and play my part." Jackson smirked, feeling a mix of emotions, and it was clear he understood the situation. "From you?" Lena arched a brow. "Excuse me, you always had a unique way of making things work in your favorite favor," he said. "Charlie's just following your example." She smiled. Her eyes sparkled, and a small smile danced at the corner of her lips. The food arrived, and for a while, they simply enjoyed the moment, appreciated the comfortable silence between them, feeling almost natural. But Jackson wasn't here just to enjoy an old memory. He was here because there was something more he wanted. I want to be part of his journey. Life, he said, finally setting down his fork. Lena stiffened slightly, the ease. Before slipping away, you are already here. I don't just mean picking him up from school or fixing your sink. She smiled as she pushed her plate aside. Jackson, I'm here to stay this time, he said before she could interrupt him. I understand that I can't just move on and pretend none of this occurred. I recognize my mistakes, but I want to do this right. Lena leaned back in the booth, arms crossed, and you don't. Let's swoop in and make everything better with a lovely dinner. I know he mentioned it, but just let me. She glanced away, pressing her lips together as if contemplating something important. When she finally spoke, her words carried a sense of purpose. Her voice was soft yet resolute. Charlie truly deserves a stable environment, not a father who could waver. Vanish once more the moment he loses interest. The words struck a chord he sensed them. He had the chance to defend himself, to share that he wasn't the same man who left all those years ago. She wouldn't leave again, and deep down, she hoped he would come to believe that too. Instead of arguing, he nodded and the conversation shifted afterwards. The warmth from before was replaced by a more cautious and careful atmosphere as Jackson paid for dinner and Lena rolled her eyes. With a glance exchanged, they made their way back to the car, a quiet moment shared before she climbed in. Turned to him with a hopeful smile. Charlie's a good kid. Let's make sure to support him. Jackson, I won't. Lena studied him for a moment longer, then nodded before getting into the car. Jackson stood there for a moment, taking a deep breath before moving forward. The night hadn't gone as he envisioned, but he was still in the game, and this time, he was determined. Jackson had just finished his morning coffee when his phone began to vibrate with excitement. His assistant had called 3 times before he finally picked up, the urgency in the man's voice shining through. Straight through the morning fog in his brain. Sir, everything is going to be just fine. Jackson smiled. Why wouldn't it be? It's just that your entire weekend has been cleared from your schedule. No meetings, no calls, nothing. Jackson blinked in surprise. His assistant hesitated, but I gathered as much after I received an interesting call from someone who said they were your son. What a surprise. I initially thought it might be a prank, but he was quite determined. The assistant cleared his throat, and with a hint of excitement, he said, and I quote, Hi, this. Charlie. My dad is fully engaged in being a real dad this weekend. Let's reschedule everything. Bye for now. Jackson pressed his fingers to the bridge of his nose, hoping for the best. Tell me you didn't actually clear my schedule. I reached out to confirm with you, but he hung up before I could ask, so I made an assumption. Considering the recent developments, it's possible you may have authorized it. Jackson breathed out. I'll take my time with it. He hung up and grabbed his jacket, already moving forward. On his way to the car, he knocked on Lena's door. Feeling a bit puzzled, but ready for whatever came next. Slightly amused and mostly curious about the exciting adventure ahead. Lena opened the door with her arms crossed and one brow raised. Clearly curious about your arrival. Charlie Jackson didn't answer immediately, looking past her into the apartment where Charlie was sprawled out. The couch was casually flipping through TV channels, as if nothing had happened to disrupt his father's entire weekend. Did you tell my? During the dad retreat this weekend, Charlie had a playful smirk on his face, remote still in hand. You're welcome, Jackson. Looked at him, weighing whether to feel annoyed or impressed, and leaning towards the latter. Both you accessed my calendar, Charlie scoffed. Accessed is a powerful term, more akin to guiding corporate improvements. Lena released a gentle sigh. Charlie took a breath and shrugged, wondering what it could be. It's my fault that his schedule is easier to access than my school's Wi-Fi. Jackson ran a hand over his jaw. So just to be. It's wonderful. I now have an entire free weekend because a 7-year-old decided I should. Charlie grinned. It seems that way. Lena shook her head, a hint of amusement in her expression. What exactly was your plan, genius? Charlie sat up, resting comfortably. With his elbows on his knees, we can simply go somewhere together, free from business and phones. Calls, no urgent matters. Just us. Jackson exhaled, leaning against the door frame. And if I had said no? Charlie smirked. That wasn't really a option. Lena looked between them, clearly weighing her choices, then let out a hopeful sigh. That's great. I'm driving, and Jackson playfully raised his hands in mock surrender. I wouldn't even think about it. Lena, full of determination, didn't wait for a response and quickly grabbed her keys. Hours later, Jackson found himself standing at the edge of a serene lake, embracing the unfamiliarity as he held a fishing rod that Charlie had eagerly thrust into his hands with an abundance of excitement. "This feels like a bit much," Jackson said with a slight adjustment to his grip, while Charlie rolled his eyes. "You're in a suit. I didn't have the chance to change." Charlie looked him up, and it would have been great to make time. Lena was sitting just a few feet away on a blanket, pretending to read while clearly delighting in the spectacle as Jackson fumbled with the rod. Charlie let out a playful sigh and plopped down beside him. "All right, let's get started. First, try to appear relaxed and friendly, as if you're just having a casual chat with the fish." Jackson gave him a flat look. "Is that really how you're teaching me?" "I'm 7. Jackson quietly expressed his thoughts but chose to follow Charlie's lead. He followed the instructions with great enthusiasm, casting the line out as the reel clicked and spun, landing in the water with a gentle splash. Plunk. Charlie clapped his hands together, and Jackson gave him a thumbs up. It wasn't perfect, but it was a step in the right direction. An expansive view, high praise. They sat there for a while, the lake stretching wide in front of them. The afternoon sun reflected off the surface in soft ripples. It was peaceful. The kind of quiet. Jackson felt a sense of surprise as Charlie shifted beside him, his tone becoming more relaxed and easygoing. "So, what do you actually do all day?" Jackson smirked slightly. "You mean aside?" Charlie grinned and playfully nudged him after attending the surprise dad retreats. With his elbow, "Come on, like for real." Jackson exhaled, glancing at the lake. "Meetings, calls, and problem-solving can be quite the challenge." Charlie made a face, but Lena still found a way to stay engaged. With a playful smirk, Jackson shot Charlie a knowing glance while pretending to read behind her book. "There was a time when I truly enjoyed it." Charlie propped his chin on his hand. "Absolutely." Jackson took a brief pause. "And then I met you, Charlie," who blinked his eyes in surprise. The usual quick comeback was suddenly missing as he shifted slightly, pretending to adjust his fishing rod. "That's a pretty good answer." Lena finally looked up. Watching them, there was a gentle quality in the way she studied them now, as if she was discovering something she hadn't allowed herself to see before. She believed it was possible, and Jackson felt it too. He had faith, dedicated his life to pursuing success, creating something greater, something enduring, and yet, at this moment, he is sitting on the edge of a serene lake with his son beside him, leaning nearby. This is what truly feels real and fulfilling. For the first time in years, he felt complete. The lake trip marked a joyful return to a long-awaited sense of fulfillment. While Jackson sensed something beyond mere control, something more than the relentless drive to move forward. He hadn't yet realized it. How much he longed to simply be away from boardrooms and stock markets, to relax on the shore of a tranquil lake with. Charlie was having a tough time with fishing. But as he listened to Lena's voice floating in the breeze, it felt both new and comforting. Something he desired more than anything as the last night of the trip arrived, the air cooled, and the three of them sat together. By the fire pit outside the small cabin they had rented, the flames danced joyfully, casting shadows across the wooden deck. The scent of burning wood mingles delightfully with the gentle trace of the lake air. Charlie was roasting a marshmallow, eyes sparkling with focus, while Lena sat nearby, with her legs pulled up on the chair, gazing at the fire in silence. It felt wonderfully easy in a way that nothing had ever felt before. For Jackson, it was like the version of his life that had been waiting for him all along. Charlie shifted, then reached into his. "In my pocket, I discovered something." Jackson looked over, momentarily captivated by the scene. Charlie was now presenting a small velvet ring box, and he almost choked on his drink, coughing with excitement as he held it up. With a light-hearted touch, he casually turned it over in his hands as if it were a toy, and relaxed, Charlie said. With a quick look, "It's not yours, it's Mom's." She held on to it. Jackson froze, filled with anticipation, knowing exactly what was inside before Charlie even popped. The lid opened, revealing a ring that had hardly changed, a simple yet elegant design, full of charm. Simple yet elegant. Just a silver band with a single perfectly cut stone he had selected it all those years ago because it brought back memories of Lena, simple and genuine. Something that thrived without the need for excess. To be beautiful, he had given it to her in a moment of certainty, young and full of hope, believing that nothing in the The world could pull them apart, and now here it was. Lena turned just in time to see. What Charlie was holding made her entire body tense as she sat up straight. "Charlie, where did you get that?" Charlie shrugged, unbothered, and discovered it in your drawer, something you had no right to take. Lena's voice had a sharpness to it, yet beneath that, there was an intriguing layer of something unsteady that Jackson wasn't quite able to grasp. Looking at Charlie, his focus was on Lena, and for the first time since this entire mess started, he saw a glimmer of hope. There was a spark in her that she had been trying to conceal, a hint of hesitation and vulnerability, something she had spent years working through. He said quietly, holding the ring between his fingers, "You kept it." Lena crossed, her arms looking away. "I meant to pawn it years ago, but you didn't." The fire crackled, bringing warmth to the moment. Amidst the silence that lingered, Charlie observed them with the curiosity of a spectator at a play, his excitement building. Lena exhaled, rubbing her hands over her jeans. As the marshmallow was forgotten, worried that if he let it go, he might let us go too. Jackson took a deep breath. He hadn't. He had anticipated an excuse, a brush-off, or perhaps even a disagreement. But not. He took his time, reaching over to gently place the ring. Back in her palm, she curled her fingers around it and held on tightly, he said. "When you're ready," Lena simply sat there, her hands gently cradling the ring, her shoulders relaxed. Longer tense, and for the first time Jackson sensed a change between them, not a grand declaration, not an immediate solution, yet something genuine. She finally smiled as the months went by. Didn't go back to what was expected because there was a new path to embrace. There was only. Now Jackson embraced the flow, allowing things to unfold just as they were meant to on some days. Lena welcomed him on some days, while on others, she maintained her boundaries. Charlie, naturally, was more open. It was a complex situation as he confidently insisted on having Jackson in his life, just like he had boldly interrupted the wedding, with a delightful lack of subtlety. The three of them were attending a wedding together, celebrating one of Lena's friends from work. There's something special about the one Jackson had left behind. It was small and intimate. The kind of wedding where people genuinely connected, where laughter filled the room and joy radiated instead of the pressure of perfection. In a magnificent ballroom, Jackson sat at the table with Charlie beside him, joyfully watching as the bride and groom shared their special moment. Lena was across the room chatting with a friend, her expression full of joy. Feeling a sense of calm that had been absent for quite some time, Charlie leaned over. Jackson smirked, glancing at him. "Totally crashing your wedding one day? Not if I invite you first." Charlie chuckled, grabbing a bread roll from the basket in front of him. "Yeah, okay. Wishing you all the best with that." Across the room, Lena's gaze met Jackson's, and she didn't. She glanced away. A small nod accompanying her response, and that was all. They may not have been perfect, and their story wasn't wrapped up in a flawless ending, but they were a family, and that was truly special. Jackson stood on the porch of Lena's apartment, gazing at the small flower pot resting on the step, feeling a sense of hope and possibility. Had left a cheerful note stuck beneath the pot, encouraging Jackson to water it if he was going to keep hanging around like a stray cat brought a moment of joy to Jackson, and he recognized just how much it meant to him. In the past few months, he has embraced the changes, learning to navigate grocery stores and picking Charlie up from school with ease. Expressing concerns about traffic and addressing small details around the apartment, even if he wasn't quite skilled at it yet. He attended parent-teacher conferences, explained math problems, and offered advice on sports with enthusiasm. Although Charlie promised he wouldn't listen, there were times when Jackson noticed Lena, watching him fold laundry or scrub dishes. Her expression was a mystery as he went about his tasks. When asked if something was wrong, she'd shrug and say, "I'm still getting used to this." She realized she had successfully navigated her journey independently for so long that having an extra pair of hands felt like an exciting new arrangement. Still has the opportunity to shine. He recalled the initial moments when he attempted to integrate himself into their routines, and Lena has been so protective, and Charlie has been so quick with his clever remarks, using humor to hide his deep desire for a father who showed up with a light-hearted spirit, as Charlie was genuinely committed to helping Jackson put in the effort. Over time, the three of them found a delicate sense of normalcy. "Jackson, I found that preparing dinner was more challenging than sealing million-dollar contracts, all while dealing with a leaky roof and a cozy apartment." could feel more challenging than negotiating with investors, especially at night when Charlie had finally gone to bed. Jackson and Lena would chat softly about little things and grand ideas, and everything in between. He discovered how she often stayed up late, filled with hope and concern for Charlie's future, and how she sometimes thought about whether inviting Jackson in was the right choice. He would be attentive, never urging her to feel something she wasn't prepared for. In return, she started allowing him to assist in ways that extended beyond just financial support. She entrusted him with driving Charlie to weekend activities and warmly invited him to birthday parties for Charlie, classmates, and occasionally allowed herself to relax enough to smile when he playfully teased her about the number of coffee mugs. She owned the moments they discovered to spend time together, feeling genuine and effortless. On some weekends, they take the car out to the edge of the city and explore small towns, stopping in thrift shops and old diners where Charlie would roll. His eyes sparkled every time Jackson asked about local menu items, a reminder that delicious food can come from anywhere. And not everyone needed a five-star chef to create something special. Occasionally, Jackson would find himself dreaming of a different life, filled with possibilities, the way he used to, envisioning a future filled with possibilities rather than focusing solely on corporate expansions and shareholder satisfaction. Relaxed Sunday mornings with Charlie in the living room, cartoons playing on the TV, and Lena enjoying her coffee, encouraging them both to. Turning the volume down each day felt like a gentle step toward the man he aspired to be, moving away from the past and embracing a brighter future. And he felt grateful that Lena and Charlie believed in him enough to give him a chance to try. Once again, on a delightful Friday evening, Jackson found himself at a hardware store picking up supplies to fix a loose cabinet handle in Lena's kitchen. He embraced the challenge of doing it himself, recalling the satisfaction of tackling home projects. Charlie's joyful teasing the last time he tried something on his own, as he was eager to learn and discover if he could be the kind of person who tackled everyday problems head-on instead of passing them off while he explored. The aisles were alive with energy as his phone buzzed with messages from executives inviting him to join a last-minute conference. Called to finalize a merger, he stared at the phone, feeling a surge of excitement at the possibility. But then he thought back to how Charlie had appeared last weekend when Jackson had to cancel their fishing plans for an unexpected situation. At the office, the boy's face showed a hint of disappointment that gradually faded over the days. With determination, Jackson grabbed the tools he needed and headed to the register, brushing off any distractions along the way. Feeling like he was stepping away from a thrilling adventure, Charlie arrived at Lena's apartment that night, opened the door, gave him a playful salute, and pointed to the kitchen. Jackson put. He took off his jacket and eagerly got to work while Charlie cheerfully supervised. Lena was out on a late shift, so the two of them enjoyed a cozy evening with the radio playing softly, happily chatting about the little things in life. Charlie asked him about his childhood, and Jackson found himself cheerfully admitting that he had once tried to run a lemonade stand only to lose interest after a few days. Char laughed, playfully calling him a quitter. And Jackson pointed out that at least he hadn't tried to sell candy bars like Charlie did, and they kept the conversation light and friendly. Playful banter filled the air, the radio blending harmoniously with the soothing sounds of a city night as Lena arrived home. Jackson had fixed the cabinet handle, and even though he accidentally nicked the wood in the process, Charlie made it look great, sure to point that out, but Lena only shook her head, seeing it as an improvement. Anyway, a few weeks later, Charlie had another bright idea. He found Jackson rummaging in the closet for extra blankets, took a seat on the couch, and announced that it was time for a bigger step. Jackson, still half buried in the closet, asked what he meant. And Charlie expressed that since everything had been going so well, it might be a great idea for Jackson to take Lena on an actual date again, but this time with a fresh twist. Time to do it right. Jackson reminded Charlie of that memorable last date at the diner, how it ended with Lena's walls going back up the moment he mentioned the future, but Charlie rolled his eyes, ready to face whatever comes next, explaining that her resistance stemmed from the fear of him disappearing again. Show her you won't. Charlie expressed in a straightforward manner as if it were the easiest thing imaginable that sparked Jackson's thoughts. He remembered. The ring Charlie had unearthed at the lake symbolizes the cherished promise he once made to Lena. The ring remained in Lena's possession, safely tucked away in a drawer. Out of sight for now, as she was taking her time to embrace the moment before wearing it. But she also hadn't pawned it as she once claimed she would. Jackson wondered what it might mean if he suggested. Something more lasting within him hesitated at the thought, believing it might be a bit premature. Yet hopeful that Lena would embrace the journey if he took the leap. Pushed. Yet another part of him realized that he was ready to embrace a full commitment instead of lingering in the uncertainty of half-heartedness. Wanted a life with her and Charlie. Something solid and lasting, filled with the promise of a bright future together, free from any doubts about him walking away. He took Lena to a small art gallery downtown the following Saturday. And it was a delightful experience. It was a fancy moment that felt like an opportunity for them to share something beyond the everyday routine. Responsibilities. She admired the paintings, occasionally making a playful remark about how Jackson could sponsor local artists instead of global corporations. He smiled, sharing that he had been considering branching out his philanthropy. And she raised an eyebrow in surprise. She appeared to be seeing him in a new light. In a different light, as if he was genuinely embracing a simpler world. They concluded the evening at a charming bistro that welcomed walk-ins, and he happily waited in line with her, surrounded by couples enjoying their dates and families with energetic children. While the lively hum of conversations dances off the brick walls, Lena's posture relaxed as they reminisced about the fun times they had sneaking cheap pizza back in the day. In college, Jackson once made a grand gesture to impress her by booking a fancy rooftop restaurant, even before he had any money. They chuckled about how out of place they had felt, imagining the waiter probably knew Jackson's suit was borrowed by that time. They sat down, and Jackson could sense a delightful shift. Lena was opening up to him, allowing him to get closer. Enough to feel a quiet hope that perhaps it wasn't too late for them to discover something truly valuable. He spent that night at his own place brought a sense of restlessness. The big house felt expansive, almost inviting, without Charlie's lively chatter or Lena's reassuring presence. Instructions about not leaving his shoes near the door. The emptiness highlighted how unique his situation was. Priorities had shifted to admiring the city lights outside the window as he reminisced about the day Charlie found the ring and how Lena shared her fears about letting go of the ring and what it might mean for their connection. He decided. In that moment, he decided to make her an offer that she could refuse, but he was hopeful that she wouldn't. The next afternoon, he extended the invitation. Them both to a charming picnic spot just outside the city, a delightful place Charlie and Lena had visited once when Lena once shared that it was a peaceful retreat when she was younger. And it sounds lovely. Although she rarely had time to go anymore, he took the initiative to prepare lunch himself with sandwiches, fruit, and a few snacks he was sure Charlie would enjoy. They sat on a warm blanket under a large tree, dappled sunlight shifting through the leaves. Charlie eagerly dug into the food as if he hadn't eaten in ages. Lena sipped lemonade, glancing around with a nostalgic smile, as if she were cherishing a beloved memory from a special place. During their meal, Jackson cheerfully cleared his throat and asked Charlie to check the car for a cooler bag. Charlie rolled his eyes playfully. His eyes clearly noticed that he was being gently set aside for a private conversation, yet he continued on without hesitation. Once Charlie was out of earshot, Jackson turned to Lena with careful consideration. Out came a small refurbished jewelry box from his pocket, and she felt a surge of anticipation. Defenses are rising. I can sense your thoughts, he said, maintaining a calm tone, and I'm not. She was observing him intently, curious about his actions. So, what are you up to? She asked. Opened the box, and inside was the ring Charlie had first produced by the lakeside. It caught the light, reminding them both of a time when things were simpler and all they had in front of them was opportunity. Jackson spoke. We've transformed so much since our college days, and it's exciting to see how far we've come. I believe I've grown since then, and while I understand your feelings, I want you to know that I'm here now, loving you and Charlie even more. Then I know how to express that I'm not the person who left, and I have no desire to be that person again. This is me reaching out to see if. Lena pressed her lips together, gazing at the ring. I keep telling you I don't want it, but maybe there's a chance for something new. Grand gestures. I believe you mentioned this isn't a. It's a heartfelt gesture. I truly want to marry you, but only if it's what you desire to. If you let me know you're not ready, I'll be here waiting. If you say you don't want this, I'll hold on. Showing up anyway, she took the ring in her hand, and for a long moment she studied it quietly, then turned to Jackson, her defenses gradually softening. I've been afraid that if I believe you'll be there even when challenges arise, and I know I will too. She promised that. Inhaled. She set the ring down on the blanket, then slid her arms around him, resting her head against his chest. It was a gentle kiss and a warm embrace. Just a moment of understanding then. I'm excited to say yes. The wedding was a lovely small gathering held in the same place where Charlie had encouraged Jackson to join that spontaneous dad retreat. A charming lakeside spot perfect for their time together. The guest list was intimate, and the atmosphere was serene, with no reporters or business distractions. Mogul comparing contracts in the aisles, with no cameras flashing in search of sensational headlines. Instead, there were close friends of Lena's, along with a few of Jackson's colleagues who had truly become friends, and one remarkable, an enthusiastic boy who embraced his role as ring bearer with great dedication. Lena wore a simple, in her lovely white dress, simple yet elegant. Jackson stood at the front, doing his best to maintain his composure. He let his nerves show as he glanced at Charlie, who offered him a tiny, confident smile. The ceremony began with a delightful nod, accompanied by the gentle music played by one of Lena's friends. As she played on the guitar while walking down the makeshift stile, Jackson felt a sense of wonder, as if he was truly seeing everything for the very first time. The moment he'd always dreamed of. She was more than just the girl he once loved in college. She was the woman who embraced life's challenges, raising their child on her own and welcoming him back into her life. When she had every reason not to, when Lena joined him, Charlie stood by her side, brimming with pride and excitement. Efficient shared inspiring thoughts on commitment, unity, and the joy of building a life together. Yet Jackson seemed to miss the essence of it all. He was so immersed in the joy of being here, knowing that Lena had chosen him against all odds. Charlie was part of this and was shining with joy as if he had orchestrated the whole event himself. They exchanged vows that Lena had embraced her past with honesty, and now she was excitedly looking toward a future she was finally ready to embrace. Believe in Jackson as a commitment to always prioritize family, to never run away again, and to consistently be there for Charlie and Lena, no matter how challenging life became. When they slipped the rings onto each other's fingers, the moment felt more genuine than anything he'd felt at that canceled wedding with Victoria. This was about authenticity, not status or a polished facade. Performance in front of society was all about healing, forgiveness, and the wonderful choice to be together. Then obligation when the officiant pronounced them husband and wife. Charlie let out a joyful whoop nearly. As the ring pillow slipped from their hands, laughter filled the air among the small group of guests, and Jackson joyfully drew Lena in for a gentle kiss. It was a full circle he never saw coming, but he realized he had wanted it for a long time, even if he had been. They lingered for a moment longer, perhaps unaware of the truth before them. Embracing the joy and the cheers around them, Charlie joyfully squeezed in between them, wrapping his arms around both of them. In a delightful moment that brought smiles, Jackson playfully ruffled Charlie's hair while Lena gave his shoulder a gentle squeeze. A small family standing together at the very spot where so many truths had come to light, embracing their unique journey. But they had transformed into something more powerful and authentic than any of them had envisioned. Jackson felt the ring on his finger, the same one he had once offered in youthful hope, now sealing a promise born from both lessons. And as he glanced at Lena, memories of the day Charlie made a surprising entrance at his wedding filled his mind. On a day when everything he thought he knew was turned upside down, he reached for her hand, and she offered it to him without hesitation. Turning to face the future with excitement, Charlie hopped around proclaiming that he would surely plan more exciting family vacations. And Jackson just laughed with joy, discovering that he no longer needed to check his schedule to see if he was free. Being with them was all that mattered. Plan that truly mattered, and for the first time in his life that felt more than. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to leave a like. It truly supports the channel. And there's so much more to come. Heartwarming and emotional stories like this inspire you to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. I can't wait to hear your thoughts in the comments. Your reactions mean so much to me. Thanks for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next story.